It's been great. I need to introduce myself first of all. I am Derrick. Derrick Wilks, Pastor Derrick Wilks. I am. Sorry, come on in. My wife and I are co-leaders of a Pentecostal church in East Yorkshire, and this is a relatively new venture. Having retired from ministry 3 years ago, we've stepped back into it to help take this church on, and we're doing some evangelism there with the churches, which is good. I'm on camera. It's all right. Star of stage screen and Andy's telephone. I've known Andy for a lot of years, which is good. And now, I wasn't brought up as a Christian, and I think my mum tells a story that I used to go to Sunday school when I was a lad. I honestly don't remember it. I had no connection with church whatsoever, and it wasn't until I was in my teens, I was 17, that I came across Christians for the first time. I'd been working in a supermarket. I was become a bit of a bad lad, really. I'd learned how to steal from the supermarkets without getting caught, so I supplemented my wages by doing that. Not very clever. And this group of ladies came rushing into the supermarket at this lunchtime and thrust a little bit of scruffy little paper into my hand and rushed out again, like they did. And it was an invitation to a concert. Now, I love music, so I thought, right, okay, let's go along, and went to this really small hall in Driffield in East Yorkshire. It was a Women's Institute hall. It only held about 40 to 50 people, and it was nearly empty. In fact, I later found out I was the only visitor that night to this hall that the church put on. But they had this group of young men that were talking and singing about Jesus and how Jesus had transformed and changed their lives. And I was just enthralled by it, that something that I've never heard about before could transform and change people's lives in such a way. Made me think. Went back the following week to another event that they were putting on in the church area. And lo and behold, the guy there was saying exactly the same thing. Following Jesus will radically change your life. And age 17, 1st of April, 1973, April's Fool's Day, great. And I made that decision that if this was true, I would become a follower of Jesus. I wasn't going to go to church. That's not what it was about. I wasn't even going to call myself a Christian, but I was going to become a follower of Jesus, whatever that meant. And that started this amazing journey. You see, I gave over the control of my life to Jesus. I made him Lord of my life and determined that whatever Jesus said to do, I was going to do, wherever that took me, whatever that looks like. And that's become a really exciting journey because, to be honest, I don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow, where I'm going to end up, how I'm going to get there. It's just an incredible, incredible journey. So at the age of 17, I went off to university. I was studying industrial chemistry at Sheffield Polytechnic. I was about to, my final year at Polytechnic, I was about to make decisions about where I was going to go in terms of my career. My parents thought that was great. You know, he's going to become a doctor or a doctor of chemistry or something like that. But God had got other plans. And whilst I was at university, somebody broke into my hall of residence and they stole some of my money. This is where you get your little violin out, okay? Okay, like that. And stole some of my money. And I had to report it to the staff, and they sent this policeman down to take a witness statement from me. And I remember him to this day, sitting in my hall of residence, drinking coffee out of my one cup, because I only had one cup. And he was taking this witness statement ever so slowly and lethargically. He had his pen and he was writing it slowly down and, writing down what happened. Okay. And I thought that was going to be it. Then he got out a witness statement form and we had to do it all over again. And halfway through him writing this witness statement, as clear as the day as it is today, I heard God say, "You can do that, Derrick." And I looked at him and thought, yes, I can do it better. I can write faster than that. My handwriting's much neater than that. But God had put something into my mind that I couldn't shake. So whilst all my friends were applying for jobs in the petrochemical industry or the pharmaceutical industry, I was applying to join the police force. And I got interviewed at my home by a couple of policemen, and they walked in and said, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" Long hair, very thin, can't believe it, but there you go. I was just 21, and they were looking at me saying, "Do you really want to do this?" I said, "Yeah, I do." I started talking about faith with these two policemen, and they said, "Are you sure you really want to do this? It's not a good place for Christians." And I said, "Yes, I really think this is what I want to do." And sent me off to the training college, and 10 weeks later, I'm back on the streets of Hull in my brand new uniform, not got a clue what I'm doing. And it was at the time of one of the fireman strikes, and we had the Green Goddesses stationed in the police station. And my job for the first couple of months was stand to attention outside the police station, because they didn't trust me to go out on the streets on my own, and just to stand to attention outside the police station in case there was any trouble, and open the gate so the Green Goddesses could come in and go out and salute to the chief inspectors as they came to the police station. And it was not a good start. To be honest, I was really, really hating this job, but I really felt that this was what God wanted me to do. I'd been in the job, I think, 3 weeks, and I was so green. I was living in accommodations in Hull, and I had to catch the bus backwards and forwards to the accommodation. And like I say, I was so green. I was travelling in the bus on uniform, because it never dawned on me to put a coat on and hide the fact I was a policeman. I was proud to be a policeman. So there I am, in the middle of Hull, Ferrens Way, tea time on whatever day it was. About to catch the bus back to my digs, and this group of 3 drunken youths come over and start taking the mickey out of me. And of course, I'm so green behind the ears, I had no idea what to do or how to deal with these people. And name calling ended up a bit of pushing and shoving. And before long, they got me on the ground. They were giving me a good kicking, and they ran off down the street with my helmet as their trophy. So I had to get up and dust myself down and go back to the police station and see the training sergeant and explain why I'd lost my helmet. He wasn't impressed. This new policeman that's just arrived, and what he was more worried about, it wasn't that I'd lost my helmet, it was that I hadn't caught any of the 3 of them. He would have been really happy if I'd arrested one of them and kept one of them, but I hadn't. And they'd run off, and I had to get a new helmet. The police had a way of hardening you up in those days. So I was just 21, coming up to 22. And 2 weeks later, they had me walking around the old town of Hull, where the docks were, before they built the marina, and it was all vegetable warehouses and butchers' warehouses and little alleyways between them, and they had me working nights. Now, my dad had told me stories, because my dad was a Hull lad. My dad told me stories of the grain ships coming in during the war, and when the grain ships tied up, these hordes of rats would leap off the ship into the streets of Hull and be running round the streets. And I'm walking in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, walking down the middle of the road on the White Line, and scared to death I was going to come across these hordes of rats running around. And I got my torch on, and it was just, I was so scared. This wimpy, really, what I was doing there, I had no idea. This is what God wanted me to do. But I wasn't prepared. I wasn't trained for this. What on earth? So I went around this corner and down this little alleyway, and I'm walking along, and would you believe it? There's an old man laid on the floor in front of me, all propped up, groaning. Oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do? I haven't got no training on any of this. Excuse me, sir, are you all right? Excuse me. As I walked up to him and just sort of gingerly leant over to see what was going on, he jumped up and he grabbed me by the throat and starts shaking me. And then starts laughing. And it's one of our other policemen that's wearing a Halloween mask. And all round the corner, all the rest of the police on the shift come out and have a laugh at me. I got to tell you, I was not impressed. This was not what I signed up for. This was not my career choice. I've got to tell you, I soon learnt to harden up. By the time I'd been in Hull just 2 and a bit years, I got married to Anne, and I started to get a bit of a reputation of being fair but hard. And for the next 20 years, I stayed in the police force. Always on the front line, always the door kicker, the first out of the van, the first into a fight, the first into whatever, any trouble that was going on, I would be there. There were plenty of opportunities for promotion if I wanted it, but I turned it down always because I not heard Jesus say, go and be promoted. I was told to be a policeman, and I was going to do that until God called me out into something else, whatever that might be. And it was always at the back of my mind that at some stage God would call me out of the police force into the next stage of my journey, whatever that might be. So I was just waiting for that to happen. But whilst all that was going on, I made sure I trained at every opportunity. I became an exhibits officer, which meant that I collected exhibits from scenes of crime and documented it. I learned to use the major home system, the Home Office Large Inquiry System, which was a computer system for dealing with major crimes. So I ended up working in to do with that. Trained to be and then trained to be a detective, and eventually became a detective working in the CID office at Bridlington. Because of all this skill area, I would find myself regularly getting seconded onto murder inquiries. And if a murder happened somewhere in Humberside, they would put together a team of detectives to investigate it. The telephone would go, and we would turn out and probably go spend 2 or 3 months in Goole, or 2 or 3 months here, there, everywhere, whilst we investigated these crimes. And it was a really, really exciting part of my life. I really loved being a policeman. And that's where this book comes in, because the book is full of random stories of my time in the police force. But random stories with, there's a bit of an agenda behind it, really, because we've chosen stories, and it's written by my fabulous wife. They're my stories, but she's written it. It's all her words. And the agenda behind it is to see that God was in the detail of everything that I was going through. Everything that I did, I looked back and I could see God in the circumstance. I could see God there in that occasion. When something happened, I could look back and say, I can see now that God was there. My Jesus was there looking after me, directing me, and pointing me forward. And so the book's full of lots of random stories. And towards the end of this evening, I'll give you opportunities to ask some questions, and we might delve into some of those stories. I'll just give you one little story out of it, and then I'm going to tell you why the book is called Vice Cop to Vicar and how that came about. Every year, I was in the uniform for a while in a place called Pocklington, which is another market town in East Yorkshire. And it's very famous because William Wilberforce went to school there, and before he became the one that abolished slavery in wherever it was. And he went to school there, and there's a grammar school in Pocklington named after him. And there's a lot of rivalry between the kids that go to the grammar school and the kids that went to the secondary school in Pocklington. And every year the fair would come to the town. Hull Fair is the biggest fair in probably the world, maybe. And in August, I think it is, every year, all these little fairgrounds make their way to Hull to set up in Hull to do this 1 week, this huge fair. And on the way, they stop in little villages on the way and set up and do their little bits. And they'd always come and do the fair in Pocklington. Not a big fair, but a fair in Pocklington. And it was always at the fair in Pocklington that the trouble erupted between the kids from the grammar school and the kids from the secondary modern school. So there was always a big fight between the two groups of kids. And I was working half nights. I was a village bobby in a place called Stamford Bridge, just outside York. Another fabulous place. Loved that job. And I was supposed to be in Pocklington to make sure this trouble didn't erupt. I got in a police car and I thought, oh, it's a bit early yet. So I thought, I don't know, I'll go and do some paperwork. So Stamford Bridge is right in the middle of the countryside. So I drove up onto the Wolds, which are these beautiful set of hills around Garraby Hall, places like that. Places like villages with names like Hanging Grimston and Unkleby and places like that. They really do exist. And so I drove up through some of these tiny little villages and parked my car up in this grassed field area overlooking a load of sheep. And I'm sitting there, I'm doing my paperwork, I'm getting all sorted. And it's really quiet. And I'm thinking about David, you know, in the Bible, and he was a shepherd and how he looked after the sheep. And it was really nice. And it was so quiet. And I thought, oh, this is really good. Lovely, nice. I thought, well, I better go. They'll be kicking off at this fair, so I better go back to Pocklington. Gets into the police car and just started to drive out. And I must have parked in a dead area because the radio wasn't. I didn't have anything on the radio. As I drove out of this bit of lovely greenery, the radio burst to life, and it's the operations room calling my call sign. Juliet Romeo 66. Juliet Romeo 66. Will you answer your radio? Juliet Romeo 66. Come on. And what had happened was for two or 3 weeks beforehand, there'd been a lad in the town, a bit of a ne'er-do-well, a bit of a thug, and I'd arrested him 3 or 4 weeks in succession for damaging a post box or getting drunk and disorderly and shouting at us and just stuff like that. Just silly little things. But it had been me that had arrested him, and I'd done it for about 3 weeks consecutively. And this week he decided that he'd had enough. So he'd gone to his grandfather's house and he'd stolen his granddad's shotgun. And he'd gone to the fair with the sole intention of ambushing me and killing me. And where am I? I'm on the hills. I'm in a really, really good time with God. And he's down there in this fair with a loaded shotgun. One of my colleagues comes across him and he keeps my colleague at gunpoint for nearly an hour, saying, get Wilks here, get him here, because I'm going to kill him. Get Wilks here now. If you don't bring him, I'm going to kill you. Get Wilks here, get him. So no wonder they were getting crazy on the radio to tell me not to go to the fair, because there was this guy waiting there to ambush me. In the end, apparently, he gets, you need to put your fingers in your ears really for this, but he gets a bit anxious about all that's going on, this young man does, and he puts the shotgun in his mouth and he pulls the trigger. Doesn't kill himself. He can't even do that very well, but he does blow the side of his face out. And I know him. He's still around today. He's still badly scarred as a result of it. But I just got to say that God had got a plan for me, which included his protection at the most fabulous level. I mean, great story. You know, there I am being looked after by God, thinking about him, and there's somebody trying to kill me. You see, being in the police force is not easy. And to do 20 years in it, just really tough. We often get called to deaths and crimes, all sorts of things. Some of it we talk about in the book. Not in too much graphic detail. We have sanitized it a little bit, but it's there. Some of those stories just to give an indication, but also to see where God was in those stories, just like that was about this thing in the fair. How God was there in the detail of that. I moved into the CID and had a fabulous career in the CID. I trained other detectives. I used to take a uniform officer, and for 6 months he would work with me and I would train him to become a detective, and he would follow me around and we would work together, and then he would go off and do it himself, and I would supervise him for another 6 months and then take another one. And that was I love doing that, training up policemen and helping them to do that. And one day I came back. I'd finished on a murder inquiry in another part of the country, and I'd come back to the police station at Pocklington where our office was, There was 2 detective sergeants and there were 4 detectives in the office at the time, and I was one of them. And I came back and I didn't have any paperwork allocated to me because I'd been away on this inquiry. So I thought, I know, I'll pick up some of this, something else. I'll find something to do. And the sergeant used to keep a tray in his office of papers and little bits of information, snippets of intelligence, if you like, that if you didn't have anything to do, you could go and pick some of this up and investigate, see if there was anything in it. And we used to call it the rainy day count, the rainy day box. And I remember it was a rainy day. And I'm sitting in the office thinking, I'm a bit bored. I'm going to have a look in this. So I went into the sergeant's office and picked up this envelope. Little did I know what this was going to do for me and do to me. It was a letter that had been intercepted by the United States Postal Service. We'll get this right. It had been then sent from the United States Postal Service to Interpol in somewhere abroad. Interpol had looked at it and they sent it down to Scotland Yard, and Scotland Yard had eventually sent it up to Bridlington, where it had sat in the sergeant's tray for probably a week, 2 weeks, something like that, just unattended. And it was a letter that had been received in America, sent by somebody in England who was offering child pornography for sale. The only clue to who it might have come from was a telephone number. There wasn't an address. There was a PO box associated with it in London, but the only thing that was a telephone number, and it was a Bridlington telephone number. And this started this I was going to say almost international investigation that I ended up running. It took me the length and breadth of the country eventually, because there was a man living in Bridlington, very well known, very highly respected man. Used to be the managing director of a major newspaper, and as a sideline, he was selling child pornography. And it was in the days just before the internet. So this was still analog. It was photographs, printed photographs and videos rather than internet stuff. And he had one of his rooms in his house was converted as his office, and he had filing cabinets full of pictures and filing cabinets full of letters that he'd received from people wanting to buy these pictures. So we started this investigation. We eventually raided his house and seized all of this stuff. He had a Filipino houseboy. Somehow he managed to get this boy from the Philippines into the country, a little teenager that he was abusing, basically. And he was just basically a slave in the house. And we managed to free this guy, get him sent back to his home eventually, back where he came from. And we started this inquiry that took me then the length and breadth of the country, because he had all these letters from all these people who wanted this stuff, and he'd even marked on the letters what stuff they actually sent them. So for months and months and months, my job was to evidence all this stuff, which meant I had to itemize all the photographs. I had to read all the letters. I had to mark up the letters and the photographs so we could say, these photographs came to this person. These photographs went to that person. And then we had to look at the videos that he'd got. And we found the man that was producing the photos. He would send them reels and reels of films off to somewhere else down in Cornwall, I think. And he would produce these pictures and send them back to this guy in Bridlington who was making this thing. And about 18 months later, there was this huge raid that took place. It was involved with the National Crime Intelligence Service and New Scotland Yard, their paedophile squads. And we raided maybe 30 houses the length and breadth of this country on the same day. It was a bit like the TV program, the Sweeney or something like that. They got a knock at the door and the doors were kicked in, and all these people were arrested, and all their material was seized. And there was one house in West Yorkshire that had been converted as a 3-story house, and that had been converted into 3 video recording studios, which was being used for producing videos of children being abused. So then I had to go up and down the country again, examining all the materials that had been found. And you can imagine, it was some of the most horrendous stuff that you could possibly ever imagine. And it was in those days that the police really didn't have a safety net for you. There was no support for you whatsoever. So once I started to wrap this one up, guess what? There was another one. Oh, Derrick's got some experience of dealing with this. Derrick, would you take this job on? And for about 3 years, that seemed to be nearly all I did. But all the time, it was screwing around in my head, as you can imagine. And I remember, this is why it's called Vice Cop to Vicar, because that's the Vice Cop part of it. I remember on a Sunday morning going down to church, and my job as part of the PA crew was to put together the sound system for our church services. And I remember going down to the church, and I had to put the speakers on the stands. I remember picking up one of these speakers, and as I put it up onto the stand, I was just overcome with rage. All of a sudden, everything that I'd been seeing, everything that I'd been dealing with over these last 3 months just sort of collapsed me. And I had this immense breakdown. I couldn't do anything. I went home and I basically stared at a wall. When I went to sleep on a night time, I was just reliving in my dreams all the stuff that I'd seen over and over and over again. And let me just read a part of the book to you. To be angry all the time was frightening. I vividly remember those sweat-drenched nights, being angry, traumatized, and one step away from being sent to a specialist hospital. I constantly suffered with the thoughts of, there we go again. The rage would slowly build, starting at my feet before crawling its way up my body. The slow, rhythmical, peaceful sound of Anne sleeping next to me did nothing to quell that fear that accompanied the rage. Rage of what I had become, anger almost uncontrollable, eating away at my insides. I'd have a sheen of sweat on my body as the images flashed before my mind like a never-ending newsreel. Every time I closed my eyes, it was like pressing play of the worst videos I'd ever had to watch. I would experience the helplessness I felt because I couldn't do anything to change the torment on the faces of those people that were being abused. It was just so overwhelming. The police took one look at me and said, "You're not fit to be a policeman anymore." Diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You probably have heard about that. It's what the soldiers get when they come back from fighting abroad when they've seen horrors. That's what I had. They tried everything that they could, sent me to see some specialists, counselling. Nothing helped. And in the end, they said, "Derrick, you're 66% disabled. The maximum level of disability that the police can ever give you, 66%. 3/4 disabled, basically. Not fit to do anything. Still just staring at a wall at home." 18 months this lasted. People came and people prayed for me. Nothing happened. Eventually, church people stopped coming because, they were embarrassed. They prayed for me and still nothing had happened. And then a good friend of mine, Kim, he contacted me and says, "Derrick, would you like to come with me to Sheffield?" I said, "No, I don't leave the house. I can't be away from Anne for just a moment or two. I just get panic attacks. I'm just awful." I just, no. He says, "I'll go with you, but I'd really want you to go and meet this man." He says, his name's Reinhard Bonnke. And my friend had worked with him in Africa. He'd been on his sound crew for a number of years, traveled all over Africa with Reinhard. Reinhard was coming to, I think it was Doncaster or Sheffield, to do a crusade. And he says, I'll take you there and I'll introduce you to Reinhard. I'll get him to pray with you. And I'm sure God will do something. He has a bit of a prophetic gift, my friend. So I said, okay, I'll come with you. So I went to Sheffield, Doncaster, I think it was Doncaster, and went to this meeting, and he totally forgot about this. And he called people forward to be prayed for. He preached the gospel, people got saved. Called people forward to be prayed for. And I was expecting him to call me out, and he never did. So in the end, my friend got hold of my hand and rushed me as at the end of the meeting. We caught up with Reinhard as he's just getting into his car in the car park. And I thought, this is it. This is going to be the moment. This is going to be it. I'm, going to have an angelic visitation. God's going to do something. I'm going to be healed. I'm going to go back to being a policeman again. This is great. I know this is my moment. And Reinhard looked at me and he said, hello, Kim, how are things? He talked to my friend. And Kim says, oh, yeah, this is my friend, Derrick. Oh, and Reinhard said, okay, came over, put his hand on my head and said, in the name of Jesus, be healed. Turned around and jumped in his car and drove off. And I went, is that it? Is that all I get? Nothing happened. A month to the day, I'm sitting in my living room, still staring at the wall, not able to listen to music because it would trigger me, not able to watch much on TV because it would trigger me. All sorts of different things would trigger me, these panic attacks and stuff that was going on. And a month to the day, I'm sitting in my living room and it's as though, click, suddenly I went ping, the lights came on. And I just knew at that moment, God had started the healing process. Can't say I never went back to being the policeman because God had wanted something else. The change was dramatic. The hard policeman that could do everything, the door kicker, had gone. Out of it came this sensible, I hope I am, compassionate, most certainly am, man, a new husband, a new dad to my kids, and within a month of that, we joined a national evangelism team, and we were starting to go around the country, starting to tell people about Jesus. See, Jesus had healed me, but also changed me. He just didn't heal me to make me what I was. He healed me to make me what he wanted me to become. Because this new Derrick was the one that was going to do things for him. Whereas before, the old Derrick was very capable. This door kicker, I could do it, but I was doing it in my own strength. I knew that I was a good policeman. I knew I was a great detective. I knew I could do all of this. And now here I am, this very, very different man, completely changed, healed and restored, yes, very, very different. Still have to be a little bit careful with stress. I can still find myself, if I'm not careful, going to places. But all the dreams have gone. All the memories have gone. Although still technically, as far as the police are concerned, 66, you're more disabled than me. But God had done a work in my life because that's the God that I serve. And I just knew that was going to be the next stage of my journey for him. How are we doing for time? 10 more minutes. Okay, 10 more minutes. Okay, good. Good morning. All right, good. I said I was going to leave some opportunity for you to ask some questions because, like I said, there's a load of stories, and I could talk about all sorts of things, but not necessarily something that you want to hear. So,
yeah, well, if you want, yes, carry on. Yes, yeah, do the questions.
Okay, do you want that now, or do you want another story? Carry on. You want another story?
No, I want you to carry on with what you were saying. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah,
all right.
I want to know more about what you did and how you moved on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, started working for an evangelism team, and we relocated to Birkenhead and joined Elim's national evangelism team, where we would spend the next 5 years just traveling around, putting tents up, doing tent crusades. We would find, whatever. Went to Ashington, down here, put a blue and white tent up in the middle of a field and put on an evangelistic event. And during the winter months, we would be making the equipment to go into the tents and making leaflets about it. And then during the summer months, we would be out just doing one tent crusade after another, after another, after another. And it was fabulous because we got to see all these people coming to faith. Pardon?
Can I just ask a question?
How long ago would that be?
2000 till 2005?
Yeah, 2000 to 2005-ish, something like that. Yeah, absolutely brilliant seeing all these people coming to faith, seeing people being healed and restored. Some fabulous stories of people being healed. Do you want to hear a healing story? Yeah, no, I'll throw a healing story, okay. There's so many. I'm trying to pick one healing story. I'm going to do two. This one to do with the Crusades and one to do with no, I won't do that. Okay, yes. We went to the Isle of Wight, Isle of Man, get the right island. We traveled to so many places. Almost every weekend we were in a different town doing this. We used to sleep we used to have a camper van. We used to sleep in a camper van and do security for the tents on the night time. So it was just fabulous life. And went to the Isle of Man, and we couldn't take the tent to the Isle of Man because it's an island, and we had no easy way of getting it there. So we rented the big hall on the seafront in the Isle of Man, and ran this crusade for a week in this hall. And I remember the first night that we did this crusade. It's nearly packed. The Isle of Man, we've done a lot of that publicity. This place is nearly packed. And I remember I'm doing the sound system at the front. I'm a musician, so as well as everything else that we seem to do. And I'm setting up the sound system and helping with the worship band at the front. And I remember seeing this couple of middle-aged men helping this lady into the hall, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's got an oxygen mask on, and turns out she had two sons, and they've wheeled her in and put her on the back row, right at the back right-hand corner. Remember it today. Picture it in my mind where she was. I wasn't preaching, but we were part of the team. We prayed for people at the end of the meetings. The guy, the evangelist, he preached, and people responded, became Christians. And at the end, we started praying for people that wanted to be prayed for healing, whatever else it was. And we went to pray with this lady at the back. And she didn't want to come forward, but we went to pray with her at the back. And she was explaining to me that she got emphysema, and she just arranged that the following week she was going to have a meal for her family to say goodbye, because she knew that she was very close to the end of her life. But she wanted to get all the family together and just have a moment with all her family where they could say their farewells to her and that. So it was quite sad, one of those sad moments. But we prayed for her. Next night, we're there again, place again full, people getting saved, healed, being prayed for all over the place. And she's there again. But this time she's coming in on a Zimmer frame, helped by two sons. Sons leave her, they go off, she leaves her, end of the meeting, we go back, we pray for her again. This happens every single night of this crusade. And every single night she comes in better than she was the night before. By the end of the week, she walks in on her own, unaided, no oxygen mask, no supporters, and she's saying, wow, what a difference God has done in my life. She says, I'm still having my party with my friends, my family, not to say goodbye to them, but just to celebrate what God's done. She was in her 80s. She knows she wasn't going to live forever. She knew that sooner or later she was going to find herself, death was around the corner for her, but she had, for those last few moments of her life, she had an immense restoration of what God had done for her. It's just fabulous to see. No story. Okay. We went to Barking in Barking, not far from you. Barking down here in Essex. Put the tent up there in Barking. This was a really difficult crusade. The Barking council were really pernickety. They came in, they wanted us to bury all the cables in the soil, and then made us sign a disclaimer that we wouldn't damage any of the soil. I'm not sure how we were supposed to do that when we had to bury the cables. And they had to tie all the chairs together. They made it really, really difficult. And you just know when stuff like that's happening that God's going to do something. I do. Whenever we have that sort of level of opposition with church stuff, I just know God's on the move when it comes to stuff like this. There are barking men from back. The first night we were there, there was one of the helpers comes in, and he can hardly walk, and I know him really well. He became a really good friend of mine, and he came in and said, "You're supposed to be doing the security for the place," but he says, "I can hardly move." He said he's a builder, and he'd fallen off some scaffolding and he'd hurt himself. I said, "Will you pray for us?" So we prayed for him, and which was great. Next night we came back, and he's outside playing football with all the kids, which was brilliant. Running around like a demented person. So great, absolutely great. God, I thought, right, what else is God going to do? The first night of this crusade, his family come in, and the mum, dad, and I think 3 kids, and they carry in this little tot in their arms. She must have been 3 or 4, something like that. 2 or 3, something like that. And just like a floppy doll. No response, wasn't responding, didn't respond to mum, didn't respond to touch, just a floppy doll. So, came to the end of the evening, people had got saved, we were praying for people, brought her out. We prayed for her, went away. Next night, Dad's back, and he says, "I can't bring her every night because she's just not, it's not too late for her, I can't be doing that." But he said, "Will you pray for me in her place?" Of course. So we gathered around, a few of us gathered around the evangelist and ourselves. We gathered around him, and we start praying that in the name of Jesus, this little babe back home would be healed. The next night, he's back in, and he says, "Can't keep still." He says, "When I got home," he says, "my wife suddenly said, my daughter suddenly, eyes lit up, and she started to sit up and started to make noises. Never done that before." When we checked out, it was the moment we were praying for him. At the end of the week, we were only there 7 days. At the end of the week, we'd moved from the tent and we moved into the church building in Barking, and we'd heard this girl had gradually got better and better, and we were excited that she might turn up at church this morning. There's a real buzz about the place. The church is packed, and they weren't there. Oh, okay, that's sad, isn't it? I was hoping that they might have brought her. And anyway, halfway through the service, the doors at the back of church burst open, and this family come rushing in, all sweaty and drippy and all hot and bothered, because what had happened was they'd gone to catch the bus, and this girl, who was a floppy doll just a few days before, was now walking and talking, and she got to the bus stop to get on the bus and got hold of his mum's hand and said, "No, walk. And she made the mum walk the half mile from their house to the church building. What was her name? It was Lucy. That's right, Lucy. We've been back to Barking, and we've seen her and met her. You see, God's the God of the impossible. He did it for me. He's done it for these people. And the stories can go on and on and on and on and on about just how good our God is. If you're not a Christian tonight, I would encourage you to seriously consider a change of direction and making Jesus your Lord. And start this journey, which can be so exciting. It's not called us to sit in churches and sing hymns and be miserable. He's called us to have this exciting journey with him, where he's in charge and he directs our paths and he decides where and when we're going. Is that all right?